Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are embarking on a deep dive into a period that will utterly transform what it means to be human, the Upper Paleolithic Revolution. Our mission, our goal for this exploration is to journey back roughly 50,000 years and really try to uncover that explosion of creativity, innovation, and complex thought that defined this era. Maybe more importantly, we'll try to understand why this ancient revolution is so profoundly foundational to your experience of being human today, right down to how you think, communicate, create, all of it.
That's exactly right. When we talk about the Upper Paleolithic, we're looking, broadly speaking, at a period from about 50,000 BCE, maybe stretching down to around 10,000 BCE. And this is a critical timestamp. It really marks the widespread dispersal of us, modern humans, Homo sapiens, out of Africa and across Eurasia, eventually everywhere. This era, it's often called the cognitive revolution, or sometimes the symbolic revolution. And that's precisely because it signifies this, well, monumental leap in our species' mental, social, and cultural capabilities. What makes this period even more fascinating, I think, is that Homo sapiens weren't alone on this journey. Not at all. They lived alongside, and we now know, actively interacted with other human species, most famously the Neanderthals, in many of these new places. Yet somehow it was Homo sapiens who, through these unique and rapidly evolving capacities, really began to distinguish themselves. They started reshaping their world in ways nobody had before.
Okay, so if this was truly a revolution, a profound leap, what does that actually mean for how we Homo sapiens became so distinct from our ancient relatives? And I mean, the huge question, what on earth truly sparked this massive transformative leap, the one that set us on this totally new path? It almost sounds like, flicking a switch.
It's a fantastic question. Really gets to the absolute heart of this deep dive. When we talk about a cognitive leap, it's not just some academic term. It implies a fundamental shift in how humans thought, how they perceived, how they interacted with their world. I mean, imagine a species not just reacting to its environment, but actively shaping it, interpreting it, creating entirely new layers of meaning on top of it. That's really the essence of the cognitive revolution or symbolic revolution. This period, roughly 50,000 BCE, it lines up almost perfectly with that sustained, successful spread of modern humans out of Africa across Eurasia's vast landscapes. And like you said, they weren't walking into empty lands. Far from it. We've got archaeological evidence, genetic evidence. It's increasingly pointing to this rich tapestry of coexistence, interaction with other hominins, especially Neanderthals, in Europe, Western Asia. There's even really compelling genetic proof of intermingling. So these groups weren't totally separate entities.
Right. The DNA evidence is pretty clear on that now, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But despite these interactions, Homo sapiens started showing, well, a unique edge. A set of differentiating capabilities that really allowed them to pull ahead. And these were primarily things like advanced symbolic thought, the development of increasingly complex language and communication, and this, well, explosion of creative expression. These weren't just tiny improvements, they were fundamental breakthroughs. They opened up entirely new ways of living, organizing societies, understanding the world. It was almost like a cognitive rewiring, and it showed up in pretty much every aspect of their lives.
That's fascinating. It's like a fundamental shift in our operating system.
Right.
But that truly mind-boggling question, it still remains. Why then? Why around that time? What specific forces or changes, if any, actually ignited this profound shift right at that particular moment? Was it a sudden switch, like you said, or something much more complex?
That is precisely one of the biggest and most vigorously debated questions in the field, in archaeology, anthropology, everywhere. There are compelling arguments coming from several different angles. One prominent theory, it leans towards a genetic basis. It proposes that specific genetic mutations might have been the primary catalyst. Maybe mutations enhancing the anatomy for speech, or perhaps improving neural pathways for a complex abstract reasoning. Something like that could have led to a rapid neurological change.
Like a hardware upgrade, almost.
Exactly. This view suggests an internal biological upgrade to the human brain, which then unlocked these advanced cognitive abilities, like new software running on much better hardware. It implies a relatively quick internal biological trigger. However, there's an equally compelling and widely supported alternative view. This one suggests that non-genetic factors played a much more significant role, perhaps even the primary role, in accelerating these developments. This perspective points to external pressures, changes in the human condition itself. Imagine, for instance, increased population density. As human groups got larger, the sheer complexity of social organization, managing resources, resolving conflicts, well, that would naturally demand more sophisticated communication, better cooperation.
Right, you couldn't just grunt and point anymore if you're living in a bigger group.
Precisely. You need nuanced ways to convey social rules, share complex hunting strategies, maintain cohesion, keep everyone on the same page. And then there's the huge impact of climate changes, especially the onset and the severity of the Ice Age during parts of this period. Think about the harsh, unpredictable conditions of the last glacial maximum. It demanded incredibly complex, adaptable survival strategies. Picture trying to coordinate these large-scale, highly organized hunts for huge migrating herds of mammoths, maybe, or developing intricate plans just to survive brutally cold, resource-scarce winters. These extreme environmental pressures weren't just challenges. They were powerful selective forces. They pushed human groups to innovate, to collaborate on an unprecedented scale, and they pushed them to develop more flexible, more abstract thinking just to cope with rapidly changing environments.
So it forces the change, in a way.
It really forces the issue. So this raises that important question for us to think about. Was it some kind of pre-programmed biological awakening, an internal switch? Or was it more of a dynamic, ingenious human response to overwhelming external pressures, pressures that drove us to new cognitive heights? It's, well, highly probable it was a complex mix of both, a real interplay. Maybe genetic predispositions were there, but they were activated, amplified by the demands of a really challenging world. The debate continues,
Yeah.
and it just keeps refining our understanding, showing how multifaceted human evolution really is.
It's incredible to think about that interplay, our own biology and the external world sort of forcing these transformations. And when we talk about humanity's distinction, especially in this period, the first thing that often just grabs our imagination is that incredible explosion of art. So how does this cognitive leap actually show up? How did our ancestors first start telling stories, not just with words, but with images, with objects? What's that mean for how we express ourselves?
Absolutely. The emergence of art is, well, perhaps the most visible, most striking manifestation of the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, and it gives us direct, tangible evidence of that symbolic thought, that ability to express abstract concepts we've been talking about. Art in this period, it was far from uniform. We find this incredible diversity of forms. You've got elaborate cave paintings, sure, but also small sculptures, figurines, intricate carvings on bone and antler, and a whole range of personal ornaments, beads, pendants, things like that. And these weren't just, decorative knickknacks. They were clearly imbued with deep meaning. They served as powerful tools for communication, for ritual, for expressing identity. Let's start with the cave paintings, because they are truly monumental windows into the past. They offer this unparalleled glimpse into the minds of our ancient ancestors. The most iconic examples, they're mostly found in Europe, particularly France and Spain. And these paintings, they overwhelmingly show animal figures, majestic bison, dynamic horses, elegant deer, formidable mammoths, but also powerful predators like lions and rhinos, which is interesting. And alongside the animals, you get human figures, though often more stylized, or sometimes even composite, half human, half animal. Plus, a fascinating array of abstract symbols, dots, lines, geometric patterns. We're still figuring out what those mean.
Yeah, the abstract stuff is really intriguing.
Examples is Chauvet Cave in France. It dates back to approximately 36,000, maybe 30,000 BCE, so incredibly old. And the realism, the sheer sense of movement captured in the Chauvet paintings, it's just breathtaking, especially given how old they are. You see these magnificent depictions of challenging animals, lions, mammoths, rhinos, often shown in dynamic, almost cinematic sequences like they're galloping across the cave walls. The artists use natural pigments, of course, charcoal for outlines and black fills, red and yellow ochre for color. They even scrape the walls sometimes to create texture and depth. These aren't simple sketches, they're sophisticated compositions. Many archaeologists suggest these pieces weren't just, art for art's sake. They almost certainly carried significant ritual or symbolic weight, maybe connected to the power of these animals or the act of hunting them, or perhaps even related to shamanistic journeys into a spirit world.
Wow, imagine going into that dark cave just with flickering torchlight,
Yeah.
seeing those images.
It must have been an absolutely awe-inspiring, probably spiritual experience. Transformative, even. Then, of course, we have Lascaux Cave, also in France.
Yeah.
A bit later, around 17,000 BCE, is often called, quite reverently, the Sistine Chapel of Prehistory.
Yeah, I've heard that term.
And for good reason. Because of its immense scale, its rich, multicolored palette, and the incredibly detailed animal figures, especially those massive bulls and horses in the famous Hall of the Bulls. These images clearly reflect that deep connection to the hunting culture of the time. the animals that sustain them. Theories linking some scenes to hunting magic, rituals performed to ensure a successful hunt, maybe by capturing the animal spirit in the painting.
Right, trying to gain some control over the hunt.
Exactly. Or maybe shamanistic practices, where individuals might connect with the spirit world through these images. Those theories are widely discussed. The sheer scale and complexity of Lascaux, with its elaborate scenes, almost like narratives, it suggests a deeply communal, profoundly meaningful artistic endeavor, perhaps a sacred space for the whole tribe. And we absolutely cannot forget Altamira Caves in Spain. Its art spans a really wide period, from about 36,000 down to maybe 13,000 BCE. It's particularly famous for its incredible bison figures painted on the ceiling, often shown in various states resting or moving. What's truly masterful about Altamira is how the artists ingeniously used the natural bumps and curves, the protrusions of the cave ceiling itself.
So they incorporated the rock shape.
Precisely. They didn't just paint on a flat surface. They incorporated the three-dimensional rock formations into their art. It makes the painted bison figures appear almost alive, like they're bulging out from the rock ready to leap off the ceiling. It's not flat art. It's art that uses the environment itself to enhance the illusion, creating this stunning sense of vitality, of presence. What this really shows isn't just artistic skill, which is immense, but a profound cognitive shift. They weren't just seeing bison, they were interpreting them, giving them meaning, and using the very fabric of their world, the cave itself, to tell a story. This ability to not just observe, but to create meaning from the environment, that's a hallmark of modern human consciousness.
It's absolutely astounding. These clearly weren't just ancient doodles, were they? There was obviously a powerful why behind them, a purpose far beyond just making the cave look nice. So what are some of the leading theories, the most compelling ideas about the deeper meaning and the function of this incredible art?
You're absolutely right. Calling them doodles would be a profound misunderstanding of their sophistication, their significance. The why behind the art, well, that's indeed a rich and ongoing discussion among academics, with various compelling theories. On one hand, many theories lean towards a ritual or religious interpretation. This includes that idea of hunting magic we touched on, where the painting served as rituals to ensure successful hunts. By depicting the animals, maybe showing them injured or captured, the artist perhaps believed they could exert some kind of control over the animals in the real world, ensure a good food supply. It's a way of trying to influence an unpredictable world.
A form of sympathetic magic, maybe?
Kind of like that, yes. Another strong theory points towards shamanistic practices. The cave itself might have been seen as a sacred space, maybe a portal connecting to the spirit world. Shamans, individuals believed to have the ability to communicate with spirits, perhaps created these images while in trance states. Or the art could have been part of ceremonies designed to facilitate those altered states. The locations themselves support this idea. Many of these paintings are in deep, dark, difficult-to-access parts of the caves.
Right, not exactly public galleries.
Exactly. You had to make a real journey, deep into the earth, away from the light. That suggests they weren't for casual viewing. They were for specific ceremonies, maybe for initiates only, ceremonies of deep spiritual significance. But then, on the other hand, there are also robust social and narrative interpretations. Some scholars propose that the art worked to strengthen tribal identity, acting like a visual language or a shared mythology for a particular group. Imagine a community gathering around these images, using them to reinforce their collective history, their origin stories, or their relationship with the natural world.
Like a history book on the walls.
In a way, yeah. It could have been a method to communicate vital knowledge, maybe about animal behavior, seasonal migrations, important hunting grounds, passing down crucial survival information across generations. And significantly, these images could well have been used to tell complex mythological stories, creating a shared cultural narrative that bound people together, giving meaning to their existence, providing moral or practical lessons. It's probably likely that the purpose wasn't just one single thing. It was multifaceted, reflecting the complex lives, beliefs, and social needs of these ancient people. They weren't just artists. They were storytellers, ritualists, communicators, all wrapped into one.
It's so clear that their art wasn't just about showing reality, but about actively creating and sharing meaning. And it wasn't only on the grand scale of cave walls. We see this same incredible explosion of creativity in smaller things, more personal objects, what archaeologists call portable art. What can those tell us about the individual lives, the beliefs, the identities of Upper Paleolithic people?
Yet portable art offers this incredibly intimate glimpse into the everyday lives, the beliefs, the social dynamics of Upper Paleolithic people. Unlike the cave art, which is fixed, these are objects that can be carried, traded, worn, owned. That makes them distinct and often deeply personal. They speak volumes about individuality and social connection. The most famous examples, no doubt, are the Venus figurines. We find them across a huge geographical area, Europe, Eurasia, dating roughly from 35,000 down to maybe 15,000 BCE. These are small, usually female figurines, typically carved from soft stone like limestone or steatite, but sometimes bone, ivory, even fired clay. What's immediately striking about them is a consistent emphasis on exaggerated fertility features. Prominent breasts, hips, abdomen, often a focus on the vulva. But the facial features are frequently minimized or completely absent.
Right, they're often faceless, aren't they?
Exactly. That anonymity suggests they probably weren't portraits of specific individuals. More likely archetypes or symbols. Famous examples. Well, there's the Willendorf Venus from Austria, about 28,000, 25,000 BCE, with its distinctive braided hair or maybe woven headdress. And the even older Hull Fels Venus from Germany, around 35,000 BCE, which is one of the earliest undisputed depictions of a human figure anywhere in the world. Now, the interpretations of these Venus figurines, they're varied and equally fascinating. Some theories suggest they were tied to fertility cults, or maybe represented goddesses linked to procreation, abundance, the continuation of life. Makes sense given the focus on fecundity. Others propose they were symbols of social status, perhaps worn or owned by important individuals. Or they might have represented gender roles within their societies, acting as talismans or perhaps teaching aids for young women. It's even been suggested, quite thoughtfully I think, that they might be self-portraits made by women looking down at their own bodies, which could explain some of the distorted perspectives we see.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Isn't it? Or maybe they were aids for understanding human anatomy or childbirth in a time without medical texts and their widespread distribution. That also hints at shared cultural beliefs or maybe extensive trade networks connecting different groups. But beyond the Venus figurines, the artistic creativity of the time is also profoundly clear in bone and ivory carvings. We find these exquisitely detailed animal figures, little mammoths, tiny horse figurines from places like Vogelherd Cave in Germany. These show incredible fine craftsmanship, amazing attention to detail, despite being so small, demonstrating not just artistic skill, but a deep knowledge of animal anatomy. And these materials, bone, ivory, antler, they were also used for practical things, like intricately carved tool handles and a variety of personal ornaments, tiny delicate beads made from ivory or bone, or elaborate spear points with carved designs. This really shows that art wasn't separate from utility. Even the tools they needed to survive could be objects of beauty and symbolic meaning. The ability to carve such detailed, delicate forms from hard materials like ivory, well, it speaks volumes about their advanced tool-making skills and their sophisticated aesthetic sense.
The art is undeniably powerful, so revealing. But what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how much of our modern world is built on symbols. And this period shows us its deep, deep roots. It's not just about what we see or create, but what we mean, how we assign abstract significance to things.
Precisely. The Upper Paleolithic Revolution really marked the profound integration of symbolic thought, of abstract concepts, into pretty much every facet of human life. It showed up not only through the breathtaking art we've discussed, but critically through the development of complex language, sophisticated communication, and elaborate rituals. People started assigning complex, shared meaning to objects, to signs, to sounds, to actions, in ways that profoundly set them apart from other hominin species. And it laid the groundwork for everything that came after, really. Think about language and communication. It's the ultimate symbol system, right? Now, while it's impossible to pinpoint the exact moment it originated, it's widely believed that the foundations of modern, complex language capable of expressing nuanced, abstract ideas were firmly laid during this period. Why was this so crucial? Well, complex language allowed for significantly increased cooperation among groups. Imagine trying to coordinate a multi-day hunt for a reindeer herd across huge plains. That needs detailed planning, assigning roles, communicating unforeseen problems.
Couldn't do that with just pointing and shouting.
Not effectively, no. Language enabled sophisticated information sharing, not just about immediate survival needs, but about past experiences, future plans, abstract concepts like spiritual beliefs or social rules. And crucially, it allowed for far more efficient and robust cultural transmission, passing down intricate knowledge, specialized skills, complex belief systems across generations, without having to rely solely on direct, hands-on demonstration for everything. When we compare Homo sapiens with, say, Neanderthals, while Neanderthals likely had some form of language for basic communication, maybe a more guttural, limited vocal range, we don't know for sure. Homo sapiens' linguistic abilities seem to have been vastly more advanced, capable of expressing abstract concepts, hypothetical scenarios, complex stories. This capacity was absolutely critical for planning those advanced hunting strategies we talked about, for strengthening social bonds within ever larger, more complex communities, and perhaps most profoundly, for narrating mythological stories, creating those shared cultural narratives that gave meaning to life and bound people together through collective memory and belief.
And it wasn't just spoken symbols, the words, but visual ones too, right? Things you could actually wear or carry, things that communicated something about you or your group, maybe even your place in that group's society.
Yes, absolutely. Symbolic objects and personal ornaments are another crystal clear sign of this burgeoning symbolic capacity and the developing complexity of social life. We see widespread use of personal adornment during this period. Necklaces, bracelets, beads, meticulously crafted from a really diverse range of materials. Perforated seashells, polished animal teeth, bird bones, carefully shaped stones. These weren't just pretty things. They were potent carriers of meaning. For instance, even though it slightly predates the main Upper Paleolithic explosion, the discovery of perforated marine shells from Blombos Cave in South Africa, dating to about 70,000 BCE. That provides some of the earliest solid evidence for deliberate symbolic thought, for personal ornamentation. It sort of paved the way for the widespread use of such objects later on. In Europe, sites in France, Germany, they've yielded tens of thousands of beads, suggesting they were common, maybe even mass-produced in some areas. These objects let individuals and groups express their identity, maybe their tribal affiliation, their specific role in the community like hunter, shaman, leader, or even their personal achievement.
Like status symbols, almost.
Exactly like status symbols. They almost certainly contributed to the formation of social hierarchies, where certain rare or maybe elaborately crafted ornaments might have signaled higher status, wealth, or specific ritual authority. Imagine wearing a necklace made of unique shells that had been traded from hundreds of miles away. That's a clear statement, isn't it? And speaks of connection, resourcefulness, prestige.
Okay, so we've got art, personal adornment reflecting this really sophisticated symbolic thought. But what about the unseen world? The world of belief, the great mysteries of life and death. How did symbolism play into their understanding of these really profound concepts?
That brings us to rituals and belief systems, which are arguably the deepest expressions of symbolic thought. Our ancestors' efforts to make sense of their existence. The Upper Paleolithic period saw burial practices become significantly more elaborate. That strongly indicates developing complex belief systems, likely including ideas about an afterlife, a spirit world, or at least a profound connection between the living and the dead. A truly compelling, really poignant example comes from the Sungar burials in Russia, dating to about 34,000 BCE. Archaeologists there uncovered individuals, a mature male, two adolescents buried together with an astonishing array of grave goods, including bead-decorated clothing. The sheer number of mammoth ivory beads, over 13,000 sewn onto the clothing of just one individual.
13,000, that's unbelievable.
It's staggering. It speaks to an incredible investment of time, resources, symbolic significance. These weren't quick, simple burials. They clearly involved elaborate funerary rituals, suggesting a profound belief in the deceased's journey beyond this life, or maybe a desire to honor their status in the community, equipping them for some existence in another realm. The specific positioning of the bodies, the red ochre sprinkled over them, the rich grave goods like carved spears and ivory armbands, it all points to a complex shared cosmology. Furthermore, we see these tantalizing connections between certain cave art figures and the potential existence of shamanistic practices or complex mythologies. Some depictions in cave art, for instance, show these half-human, half-animal figures, often called the Sarianthropes.
Ah, yes, the sorcerer figure, things like that.
Exactly. Figures like that could represent shamans in a trance state, maybe embodying animal spirits. Or perhaps they illustrate mythological beings that blurred the lines between the human and animal worlds, acting as intermediaries between the physical and spiritual realms. This suggests that these ancient people believed in supernatural beings or spirits, that the world was animated by unseen forces, and they expressed these complex beliefs through their art, through their rituals. They used symbols to make sense of the world around them, to connect with the unseen, to explain things they couldn't otherwise understand, and to cope with life's big universal questions: birth, death, disease, the forces of nature that govern their very survival. It really highlights that fundamental human need to create meaning, to create narrative.
It's clear the Upper Paleolithic was a period of immense internal transformation in thought, art, belief. But this wasn't just happening in the abstract, was it? These cognitive leaps had profound practical applications. So, what does this all mean for how they literally built their world and survived in it? Because alongside all this abstract thought and art, there were also revolutionary technological advancements happening, right?
Absolutely, that's a critical point, and one that sometimes gets overlooked. The Upper Paleolithic wasn't just about art and symbols. It saw this astonishing acceleration of technological innovation, leading to the development of incredibly complex specialized tools. These tools fundamentally enabled everything, from hunting and gathering to shelter construction, daily life, everything. And crucially, these innovations weren't just isolated practical gadgets. They underpinned and were actually enabled by the very cognitive and social developments we've been discussing. Without these advanced tools, many of those complex activities like those big organized hunts or surviving really harsh climates would have been pretty much impossible. At the forefront of this technological revolution was advanced stone tool technology. The key innovation here was the widespread adoption of blade technology. This was a radical change from earlier, more basic stone tool making. Instead of just knocking off rough chunks of stone to make general-purpose choppers or hand axes, Upper Paleolithic tool makers, or knappers, learned to prepare a stone core very carefully. Then they could strike off these long, thin, remarkably sharp, parallel-sided blades.
Like getting multiple tools from one piece of stone.
That's exactly. Imagine taking a single block of high-quality flint and systematically detaching dozens of ready-made, perfectly shaped blanks for tools. These blades were incredibly versatile, super efficient. They served as the starting point for a whole range of specialized tools, from more effective spear points for hunting to precise cutting tools for processing meat, hides, plant materials. This efficiency allowed for much greater resource use, much higher productivity. And we see distinct stone tool cultures emerge across Europe, each with its own characteristic tool types, its own technological advancements, reflecting regional adaptations and maybe cultural identities. First, you have the Aurignacian culture, roughly 43,000 to 28,000 BCE, is characterized by these fine, standardized stone blades often retouched for specific jobs, plus an increasing innovative use of bone and antler tools. And the earliest undisputed cave art and personal ornaments are often associated with it. Their toolkits were highly specialized, designed for tasks like hunting agile prey, preparing hides for clothing. Following that, you get the Gravettian culture, from about 29,000 to 22,000 BCE. This one's known for developing even smaller, sharper points, often called microliths.
Microliths.
Tiny stones, right?
Yeah, tiny geometric stone inserts. They were revolutionary because you could have to stick them onto larger composite tools, like making the tip of a spear or an arrowhead. This allowed for much greater versatility and easier repair. If a tip broke, you just replaced the little microlith, not the whole spear shaft. Very clever. This culture is also strongly associated with the widespread appearance of those Venus figurines we talked about, suggesting a kind of shared cultural sphere across large areas. And finally, the Magdalenian culture. This represents the final phase of the Upper Paleolithic, roughly 17,000 to 12,000 BCE. It showcased the most advanced tool technologies of the entire period, really the peak. This is when we see common use of highly sophisticated tools like barbed harpoons for fishing, fine bone sewing needles for making fitted clothing, and incredibly detailed complex carvings on antler and bone. The Magdalenian toolkit wasn't just about making better tools individually. It was about an integrated system of resource use, precision, efficiency, reflecting a really deep understanding of their environment and the materials available. It sounds like they were truly mastering not just stone, but a whole range of materials, really pushing the boundaries of what was possible back then. What specific impact did this diversification, moving into bone and ivory, have on their daily lives, on their survival chances?
Indeed. The Upper Paleolithic saw this profound, significant increase in using bone, ivory, and antler for making tools, strategically moving beyond the limitations of just using stone. This diversification of materials allowed for even greater specialization, flexibility, efficiency in tool design and function. These materials were incredibly versatile. Bone and antler, for instance, you can grind and polish them to a much finer point than stone for certain jobs. And ivory, well, you can carve it with incredible detail. For example, we find specialized hunting implements like finely barbed harpoons and arrowheads made from bone or antler. These weren't just crude points. The barbs on harpoons, they're designed to stick firmly into fish or maybe seal blubber. They vastly improve the efficiency, the success rate of fishing and hunting large aquatic animals. Similarly, specialized arrowheads meant hunting could be done from further away with more accuracy. These innovations led directly to a more reliable, more diverse food supply, and perhaps one of the most crucial innovations yet often overlooked for just plain survival during the severe cold of the Ice Age was the bone sewing needle.
Healing.
Absolutely. These incredibly fine-eyed needles, Crafted carefully from bone, they enabled the creation of fitted leather clothing. Imagine the difference. Instead of just draping animal hides loosely over your body, they could now tailor garments, parkas, trousers, hooded capes, stuff that provided much better insulation, trapped body heat more effectively, allowed for greater mobility in deep snow or icy conditions.
That would make a huge difference.
A total game changer. Think about the difference between trying to stay warm in a rough blanket versus a well-tailored, maybe even waterproofed parka in sub-zero temperatures. This was fundamental for surviving, for thriving in those harsh, open environments. It directly enabled their expansion into much colder regions. Completely changes our image of these supposedly primitive people, doesn't it? They were far more sophisticated in their daily lives, their clothing, than we often imagine. And we also see things like bone and ivory knife handles, specialized spear points, fish hooks, all demonstrating a high degree of hunting specialization, a deep understanding of animal anatomy, and this ingenious ability to use every single part of the animals they hunted. Nothing wasted.
And with these advanced tools, it's not just about what they made, is it? It's about how they use them, how they transformed their very subsistence strategies. This isn't just technology for its own sake. It's technology that fundamentally altered how they lived, how they got food, how they survived.
Absolutely. The arrival of these advanced tools fundamentally revolutionized their hunting and gathering strategies. They weren't just getting better at what they always did. They developed entirely new ways of interacting with their environment to secure food. These tools enabled highly organized, large-scale strategies for hunting herd animals. Mammoths, reindeer, bison, the big ones. This wasn't just one or two hunters going out. It required sophisticated coordination, meticulous planning, clear communication among larger groups to drive herds into natural traps or ambushes they'd prepared. This really highlights that deep interconnection between technological advances, cognitive abilities, and social organization. They all had to work together. The development of new hunting technologies played a pivotal role in increasing efficiency and also safety. The widespread use of traps and snares, for instance. That allowed for passive hunting, letting them capture prey without direct, dangerous confrontation, or maybe securing smaller, more consistent food sources to supplement the big hunts. The spear thrower, or lordle, that was a brilliant invention.
Ah, the tool that helps you throw a spear further and harder.
Exactly. It dramatically increased the velocity and accuracy of thrown spears, effectively extending the hunter's arm, delivering much greater force. Made hunting far more effective and less dangerous for the hunter. And although it seems to appear later in the Upper Paleolithic, the emergence of the bow and arrow marked another major leap in projectile technology, enabling hunting from an even greater distance, with higher precision, more stealth. These innovations meant more successful hunts, which in turn could support larger, more stable populations, and maybe allowed for the possibility of those more semi-sedentary settlements we mentioned. Furthermore, there was a significant shift towards a diversified subsistence strategy. Alongside hunting the big game, we see widespread adoption of fishing enabled by those harpoons and hooks and hunting smaller animals, birds, rabbits, etc. This diversification made their food supply much more resilient, less reliant on just one or two major types of game, allowed them to exploit a wider range of ecological niches. Very smart.
Okay, so if we pull all these different threads together, the cognitive leaps, the incredible art, the sophisticated tools, it paints this picture of a species not just surviving, but truly flourishing, building something genuinely new. What does this all mean for how communities began to truly form, cooperate, create complex societies? Because this period seems to mark profound shifts in how people actually live together, moving beyond just simple family units or small bands.
You're absolutely right. The Upper Paleolithic Revolution wasn't just confined to individual creativity or technological skill. It fundamentally extended to profound changes in social organization, cultural structure, transforming how humans interacted with each other on a community level. And these shifts, they seem to have been largely driven by increasing population density, which naturally required greater cooperation, far more sophisticated ways of living together. We see the clear emergence of complex social structures. With larger populations, a more intricate division of labor within groups became not just beneficial, but probably essential. This means different individuals or subgroups might have specialized in certain tasks. Maybe some were master toolmakers, others were the expert hunters, while still others focused on gathering plants or crafting those elaborate ornaments. This specialization would have dramatically improved the overall efficiency and productivity for the whole community, allowing for surplus resources, maybe even more leisure time for cultural activities like art or ritual.
So specialization starts becoming key.
It seems so. And crucially, There's concrete archaeological evidence of extensive trade and exchange networks. Materials like certain types of seashells, high-quality obsidian, that volcanic glass great for tools or specific kinds of flint. Materials that were not locally available. They've been found transported hundreds, sometimes even thousands of kilometers from where they originated geologically. This is an accidental movement. It indicates communities weren't isolated. They were plugged into broad, sustained exchange networks, likely exchanging not just goods, but also information, ideas, maybe even marriage partners between groups. These networks would have fostered intergroup relationships, maybe alliances, and certainly built resilience. If resources failed in one area, you could rely on your network. It created this wider web of social connections.
Imagine the stories that traveled along those trade routes.
Exactly. And furthermore, there are subtle but compelling clues suggesting the emergence of social hierarchy. Differences in the quantity or quality of personal ornaments found buried with individuals, or the sheer elaboration of certain burial practices, like we saw vividly at Singir. These differences can point to varying statuses among individuals or groups. Not everyone got buried with thousands of ivory beads or exotic grave goods. That suggests some individuals held higher prestige, perhaps due to their skill as a master artisan, a very successful hunter, maybe their age, or specific ritual or leadership roles within the community. This indicates a move away from purely egalitarian societies towards something with more defined social distinctions.
It sounds like they might have even been moving beyond a purely nomadic existence in some areas, even if just for part of the year. Were there any early hints of more settled living, kind of foreshadowing the huge changes that would come much later with farming?
Yes, that's a really important point. While Upper Paleolithic people were indeed primarily nomadic hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, following animal migrations, there is fascinating evidence of early steps towards a more semi-sedentary life in specific, usually resource-rich regions. These weren't permanent cities like we see in the Neolithic, not at all, but rather what archaeologists sometimes call recurrent aggregation sites or semi-sedentary settlements. Places where groups gathered maybe repeatedly for extended periods. A prime example is the site of Dolní Věstonice in what's now Czechia. It dates to around 26,000 years ago. Archaeologists there have found evidence of remarkably large communities gathering, perhaps seasonally, for really complex, multifaceted activities. This includes not only communal mammoth hunting, which would yield an immense amount of meat and other resources requiring large groups to process and store, but also sophisticated early ceramic production, firing clay.
Ceramics that early.
Yes. The famous Venus of Dolní Věstonice, that ceramic figurine fired in a kiln. It comes from this site. It represents some of the earliest evidence anywhere of using pyrotechnology, high heat, for purposes beyond just cooking food. The scale and the complexity of activities at Dolní Věstonice, it really hints at a less transient lifestyle, suggesting that groups could stay put in one place for extended periods, perhaps because local resources were consistently abundant, or maybe it was a strategic location for communal activities like those mass hunts or social gatherings rituals. This was a crucial precursor, a kind of stepping stone towards the full-blown sedentary lifestyle and the agricultural revolution that would define the next major era, the Neolithic. And finally, alongside these social shifts, we also see a remarkable increased cultural diversity across different regions. Archaeological finds from all over Europe, Africa, Asia, they reveal that these communities were not monolithic. They weren't all the same. Instead, they adapted. They developed distinct traditions in their art, their tool production, their rituals, specifically tailored to their local environments, the resources available to them. So you might see one region specializing in certain types of stone tools suited for hunting the local game, while another region developed unique art styles reflecting their specific mythology or beliefs. This regional specialization reflects a flourishing of distinct cultural identities, diverse adaptive strategies, showcasing the incredible flexibility and ingenuity of Homo sapiens as they colonize vastly different environments across the globe.
Okay, so if we try to connect all these incredible developments, thinking, the art, the tools, the social changes to the bigger picture, what were the major environmental forces really shaping these changes? And ultimately, what does this period mean for us today? What's its lasting legacy?
That's the perfect question to bring it all together. The crucial backdrop, the stage upon which all this played out, was the Ice Age context. Specifically, the last glacial maximum, the LGM, which occurred roughly between 26,500 and 19,000 BCE, falling squarely within this Upper Paleolithic period. This was a time of extreme cold, very dry conditions. Vast ice sheets covered much of the northern hemisphere, significantly impacting global climates, environments, and sea levels. This harsh, fluctuating climate, It wasn't just a challenge to be endured. In many ways, it acted as a powerful catalyst for change. The cold, dry conditions influenced where animals went, how they moved in herds. This compelled human communities to innovate rapidly, to devise more effective, more cooperative, highly organized survival strategies, just to track and hunt these crucial food sources. Adaptability wasn't just helpful, it was essential.
So the climate forced their hand, pushed innovation.
It really did. And additionally, those lower global temperatures meant that massive amounts of the world's water were locked up in those huge ice sheets. This led to significantly lower sea levels than today. And these lower sea levels created land bridges that had previously been underwater. These facilitated major human migrations, most notably enabling groups to cross the Bering Land Bridge from Asia into the Americas, populating entirely new continents, demonstrating the incredible global reach of Homo sapiens by this time. So the environment wasn't just a passive backdrop. It was an active driving force behind human ingenuity, social complexity, and global spread.
So listening to all this, it feels like this wasn't just another chapter in human history. It was a truly pivotal turning point, fundamentally defining who we became, who we are.
Exactly. The Upper Paleolithic Revolution was truly a defining moment. It fundamentally shaped the identity, the capabilities of modern humans. The explosion of art we saw, the sophisticated development of symbolic thought, the creation of advanced tool technologies, the emergence of complex social structures, all of it demonstrated humanity's extraordinary capacity. To adapt to its environment, yes, but also to engage in profound abstract thought and to establish increasingly complex cooperative societies. It showed a species not just surviving in incredibly challenging conditions, but truly thriving creatively, intellectually. What's more, this period laid the critical groundwork for all future revolutions in human history. It was the essential precursor to the subsequent Neolithic Revolution, that huge shift to agriculture, settled life, the birth of permanent villages, towns, eventually cities. The cognitive and social infrastructure developed during the Upper Paleolithic, that ability to plan long-term, to cooperate effectively in large groups, to transmit complex knowledge across generations, to create shared symbolic systems. These were the very capacities that made agriculture possible, and subsequently made urban living, the formation of all modern cultures and civilizations, possible. It all builds on this foundation. It's also really important to acknowledge this isn't a completely solved puzzle. It's not a closed book. There are ongoing debates and active future research that continue to refine our understanding. For example, scholars still vigorously debate whether these profound changes constituted a sudden, rapid revolution, a quick, abrupt shift happening over just a few thousand years, or whether it was a more gradual, long-term evolutionary process that built up slowly over many millennia.
Revolution versus evolution, essentially.
Precisely. And the exact roles played by genetic predispositions versus neurological developments versus environmental factors, how they all interacted to trigger and shape these developments, those are still subjects of really active research. New discoveries, new dating techniques, ancient DNA analysis. They're constantly shedding more nuanced light on these fascinating questions. It's a testament really to the dynamic nature of scientific inquiry into our deepest past. We're always learning more.
The Upper Paleolithic Revolution, then, spanning roughly from 50,000 down to 10,000 BCE, it undoubtedly stands as one of the most critical cultural and technological leaps in all of human history. The birth of art as we know it, the evolution of symbolic thought, the development of those advanced tool technologies. It all profoundly transformed Homo sapiens' relationship with their environment and maybe even more crucially with themselves.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is that those breathtaking cave paintings, those enigmatic Venus figurines, the seemingly simple but deeply meaningful beads, and the incredibly complex tools, they all reflect our ancestors' ingenuity, their profound creativity, their essential social bonds, and their brilliant, flexible strategies for survival. They tell this powerful, ongoing story of a species discovering what it truly means to be human and figuring out how to build a world filled with meaning.
So, what does this all mean for you, listening right now? As you navigate a world absolutely brimming with symbols, from the language you speak every day, the art you create or appreciate, to the brand logos you instantly recognize, even the emojis you send on your phone, just consider how deeply rooted our capacity for abstract thought and complex communication truly is. This deep dive into our ancient past, it isn't just history class stuff. It's a profound look at the very essence of what makes us human, and how those ancient sparks of genius, ignited tens of thousands of years ago, laid the foundation for everything that followed. How do the echoes of this ancient revolution still shape your creativity today, your social connections, even your ability to solve complex problems in your own life? It's a journey, really, from the flickering torchlight in the caves of Chauvet and Altamira right up to the digital landscape of the 21st century, all built on the same extraordinary symbolic human mind. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious.